You know, guys, when I was younger, I used to think that it was basically nonsense, rereading a book. Why would I reread something that I already finished when there are so many books out there that I want to read that I haven't read yet? However, as I've gotten older, I've found that there's a lot of value in rereading a book, and I was recently thinking about some great ones that I've read that I want to go back through. These are my top 10 books that I'm going to reread. Number 1, A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. This one is about a handful of rich and powerful families in the kingdom of Westeros who are at war and vying for control of the kingdom at large. I enjoyed this novel so much that I immediately went into the second installment, A Clash of Kings, which is a massive novel as well. And that was a big mistake. I got a little bit burnt out on the storyline, and I should have taken a break between installments. I'm going to reread this great novel, take a break this time, and then go forward with A Clash of Kings. Now, I know that many of you just love this series, and I must go back and reread A Game of Thrones to start this whole thing over so that I can get to the bottom of what this is all about. Now, I'd like to complete this whole series, so hopefully by the time I get through with A Dance of Dragons, Martin has been writing and publishing so that Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring are available for me once I get that far. Come on, George. 2. The Bourne Identity by Robert Ludlum. Up there with The Da Vinci Code, this is one of the most suspenseful novels I've ever read. It's about a man named Jason Bourne who wakes up in the ocean on a ship, and he has bullet holes in his body, and he doesn't know who he is or how he got there. And this story is about him trying to trace back through his history and find out who he really is. The reason I'm rereading this is not only because it's such a gripping story, but because it's the first piece in a trilogy, the second and third pieces of which I haven't read, and I want to know how the Jason Bourne story plays out in its entirety. Now, I have the second and third installments in this trilogy, Supremacy and Ultimatum, and it's been about 15 years since I've read The Bourne Identity, so I expect it will be like starting it anew for the first time, and I will complete all 3 books in this trilogy this time. 3. Desperation by Stephen King. When I was a teenager, I graduated from reading children's novels to reading adult fiction, and the very first adult novel that I read was either Desperation by Stephen King, or it was A Time to Kill by John Grisham, both of which are great books. Desperation is about an evil entity named Tack in Desperation, Nevada, that's taking over the bodies of people there and killing them. This is a straight horror novel with a lot of religious and philosophical themes. Desperation had a big impact on me because of the depth of thought that went into writing it, which was much more than I had experienced with the children's novels that I had read up to that point. Now, there's nothing wrong with children's novels. I still read them, but Desperation is kind of special for me because it set me on my path as an adult reader and as a constant reader of Stephen King's works. And for those reasons, I'm looking forward to returning to Desperation, Nevada. Number 4. The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. About 10 years ago, I picked up the first 2 books in the Hunger Games trilogy, The Hunger Games and Catching Fire, and read them straight through. Absolutely loved them. I even watched the second movie of Catching Fire, and several years later, I picked up the third installment, Mockingjay, only to realize that I couldn't remember what had happened in The Hunger Games and Catching Fire. This is a kind of post-apocalyptic piece that takes place in the United States, where juvenile representatives of the different communities battle one another to the death for survival and celebrity. Now, this isn't the genre that I would typically go for, but I thought it was a great YA story, and I think that just about anyone could potentially enjoy this. It's been a long time now since I read the first 2 installments, and I've essentially forgotten the plot, so I'm looking forward to returning to it, reading the whole trilogy this time, and reviewing the books here on the channel. Number 5. Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Siddhartha is a fictionalized account of the original Buddha's life, Siddhartha Gautama. It's about his search for enlightenment, and in this great classic, we set out on a quest with Siddhartha as he travels out into nature, trying to understand the nature of his mind and the meaning of life. It's been many years since I read Siddhartha, and I remember being enchanted by it. Rarely does a novel give me the kind of spiritual inspiration like this one has. This is a lovely little story by one of the great classic writers, and it's not a long piece either. It's a relatively easy read, and now that I've been getting into Zen, I think that I'll have a whole new appreciation for it. 6. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. This is the craziest damn thing, and the funniest book I've ever read by far. Welcome to gonzo fiction. Gonzo fiction is an extremely exaggerated true account. In this one, a writer and his lawyer head on out to Las Vegas to cover a motorcycle race during the 1960s countercultural revolution. While our journalist and main character, Raoul Duke, is in Vegas with his lawyer, they take an insane amount of drugs and the wildest stuff goes down. Hunter S. Thompson was a great writer, and this book was so laugh out loud funny that I finished it in one sitting. Not to mention, there's a great movie adaptation that's relatively faithful to the book. It stars Johnny Depp, and if you're not in the mood for reading the whole book, I highly recommend the movie version of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. 7. Chasm City by Alastair Reynolds. When I was about 17 years old, I had never read a science fiction novel, and I wanted to read one, so I jumped on the bus and went out to the local Walden Books, which was in the mall at the time, and I picked out Chasm City just based upon the cover. That, my friends, was one of the greatest literary decisions I ever made. This is so complex that I couldn't possibly explain the plot in the few moments that I have here, but it takes place on the planet of Yellowstone in Alastair Reynolds' Revelation space universe. In the book, there's the melding plague that affects both humans and computers, a kind of virus that distorts both physiological bodies and machines. And there are a ton of huge ideas in this book about consciousness and life and machines and the universe at large. I remember just being blown away at that young age at the depth of imagination of Alastair Reynolds, and to this day, he's my second favorite author behind Stephen King. If you're looking for an intelligent hard science fiction book, I highly recommend Chasm City, and I personally can't wait to go back to Revelation space. Number 8. The Wastelands by Stephen King. I've only ever reread a book in my life 3 times. I've read Fear Nothing by Dean Koontz twice, and I've read the first 2 installments of the Dark Tower series, The Gunslinger and The Drawing of the Three, 4 times each. This will be my second time making my way through the Wastelands, and it follows Roland the Gunslinger and his fellowship, or his quartet, as they make their way through the city of Lud and survive Blaine the Monorail. Now, I'm making my way back to the Dark Tower for the second time because I cherish this story. It's my favorite literary adventure and I just adore it. I even have a tattoo of the primary antagonist in this series, the Crimson King. Now, having read the first 2 installments in this series 4 times each, I'm very familiar with what happens in those books, and it's been about 10 years now since I read The Wastelands, so I'm really looking forward to my second trip through the city of Lud. Number 9. Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson, which is the first installment in the epic fantasy series, The Malazan Book of the Fallen. The Malazan Empire is at war, and in this book we follow Captain Perrin as he battles against the evil of a variety of foes. This series has it all: war, magic, mages, an incredible landscape, and the fantastic fantasy imagination of Steven Erikson. Now, the reason that I want to reread this book is because I tried to read the second installment in this series, Dead House Gates, twice, and I gave up both times. However, I've been told that in order to see the direction of this story, in order to see what's really going on, you have to complete the first 3 massive installments. It's been a few years now since I gave up on Dead House Gates, so I just want to start this whole thing anew with Gardens of the Moon. Plus, I'm more of an epic fantasy reader now than I was when I gave up on this novel. I've now completed the Lord of the Rings epic, loved it. I'm going into the 3rd book in the Stormlight Archive, and I absolutely love it. And this series is too lauded and loved and celebrated for me to miss out on this story, so I'm taking another crack at it. Leave it to me to bring 3 Stephen King books into this top 10. Number 10 is Hearts in Atlantis by my favorite writer, Stephen King. This is arguably the best fiction book that I've ever read. It's a compilation of 5 stories, 2 of which are novellas. The first novella is titled Low Men in Yellow Coats, and it's my favorite Dark Tower side story. The fact that this is Dark Tower-esque definitely contributes to my favoring of it, but I remember being more absorbed by this piece than basically any other stories that I've read. In my opinion, this is Stephen King at his best, just as far as the quality of the storytelling itself. The movie that played out in my mind's eye as I read these stories couldn't have been any more clear or captivating. You know, it's kind of rare for a constant reader to have Hearts in Atlantis as their #1 Stephen King piece, but I love this book and I am way overdue for a reread with this one. And there you have it, guys. These are my top 10 fiction books that I will be rereading very soon. I'm looking forward to all of these, but I'm especially looking forward to the books that are a part of a series that I didn't get to complete the first time. Let me know down in the comments, guys, which books you all are looking forward to rereading. Thanks for joining me, everyone. I will see you next time.